I do believe that the news media is one of the great institutions of democracy. Without that watchdog in our society, I don't see how democracy can possibly survive. I began journalism on the island of Saipan during World War II. There was a magazine called Yank magazine, which I believe became Stars and Stripes after the war. But Yank magazine was produced by the military, for military people, and it was a tabloid newspaper. I went to Yale University, and where I'd started before the war, and I worked on the newspaper there and on a magazine, and I was hired by Time and Life about 6 months before I graduated because of a parody we did at the magazine I was running. We did a parody on the New York Daily News. Because of it, the Life magazine picked it up and ran a story on it, and then tracked me down when they were trying to find out who had done it, and offered me this job, which made life a lot easier when I graduated, and I went to work for them. After about 8-9 years with Life and Time, television was rearing its head, and it was clear that the news magazines were going to have trouble competing with television news, and I managed to work my way over to NBC, where I spent time as a producer, writer, and correspondent on the Today Show in its earliest days, and went from there to CBS News and did documentaries and deeper reporting, and then on to England, where I lived for about 8 years and worked in a number of areas, including for several American magazines and newspapers, and returned ultimately in the 70s to Yale University, where I became the first director of public information, which was a journalistic function to a great extent. And that led to teaching, and teaching led to writing books, and that's where I stand today. A lot of people ask me, and where do you get the energy to write a book when you're 95 years old? Frankly, I'm conscious of the fact that I don't have much time. The news and the nature of communication have become central to my life. In selecting a title, I use due diligence and the news. So it's directly relevant to the rise of a very pernicious and destructive force in our society, and that is mistrust and defamation of the news business itself. The word truth. Truth has been so fragmented and assaulted and wounded by political life and by cynicism and by bitterness and resentments in our society that it's no longer relevant. It's become something that you can choose for yourself, whatever you want to believe in, whatever seems the most helpful or useful interpretation of facts. But careful consideration of evidence based on facts has almost gone out the door in a society that's divided and disenchanted and unable to trust other members of the society, particularly those whose opinions might differ. So with all that in mind, I thought collecting these essays and making them coherently relevant to each other, that it just might be helpful to people, to students, to interested and curious people who are looking at the condition of our society, and I'm wondering where we're going. I thought maybe this book would be helpful. I do believe that the news media is one of the great institutions of democracy that has to be protected. It is the only private enterprise in a democracy that has a constitutional protection, which is called the First Amendment. And the First Amendment says that the government cannot make any laws regulating the press. They can maintain laws of libel and slander and other offenses, but they cannot tell the press what to do. And so there is always a voice that can identify what the government is doing that may be wrong, or what corporate society may be doing that may be wrong. And without that watchdog in our society, I don't see how democracy can possibly survive. So it's of great interest to me because I want it to be healthy and helpful to my children and my grandchildren and everybody else's progeny in this society. How we could possibly govern ourselves without an independent and responsible press is beyond my understanding. I'm concerned, frankly, that our democracy is very, very fragile these days because we are such an intensely divided society. The division in our society is so deep and enduring right now that it's hard to find common ground. And democracy cannot conduct its affairs without some common principles that everybody will agree upon. They then can debate policy and public affairs in vigorously, but with a certain core set of principles that everybody agrees upon. Without those principles and without a central agreement, you know, there's a wonderful saying, the center must hold. We have people on the left, people on the right, but the center must hold if democracy is going to survive. And the center is withering in journalism. Alternate facts are not facts, they're falsehoods. There can only be one fact, one answer. Nothing ever dreamt of in the history of the country and the history of journalism matched the effect of social media, which suddenly became a cacophony, a babble of voices and speaking in every direction on every matter, and the imposition of truth was rarely a consideration to that world. You said what you wanted to believe, or you believed what you wanted to see, and it made it very difficult to maintain trust. And that's why I came to the phrase due diligence, because it seemed to me the only way you could develop trust and develop a confidence in the facts you were reading or hearing or viewing, you had to check them out. You had to really stop and ask yourself, does that really ring true? And if so, why? Where is it coming from? Who said that? And what is it based on? I mean, all kinds of questions that you used to take for granted. You used to assume, as I was growing up, that what you read in the newspaper had been checked out and was reliable. Due diligence would lead you to do more reading of books and other sources and more widely based listening and viewing habits, so that you get a shot at opposite points of view or differing points of view, and then make up your mind rather than go in with a supposition and just find whatever source is going to confirm your prejudices. Due Diligence and the News. And the subtitle is Searching for a Moral Compass in a Digital Age.